like being a weird teacher or something, you know. So before we get started, I'm going to say what some of you know I'm going to say, which is that this front table is both sad and lonely. You can take a hint, right? Excellent. Thank you. We're going to give it up for our buddy Gray. Now it's just sad. The table is just sad, no longer lonely. Excellent. Well, thank you. So welcome to Lift the Rock, you guys. As you know, we have moved to Tuesday mornings, so we're here every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. We wanted to, as always, thank our friends at the Little Rock Regional Chamber of Commerce for all that they do to support the Venture Center and entrepreneurs in the local area, as well as our friends at Janney King for keeping this place as close to spick and span as you possibly can with this many entrepreneurs in here. Our awesome screaming fast internet is provided, as always, by our friends at Hyperleap. Broadband Development Group is the communications company that has the Hyperleap product. They are one of our startups, and we are super proud of all that they've accomplished in the last year. If you want to access said screaming fast internet, you're going to do that by getting on to our guest network, which is Venture Center Guest, and the password is Real Ventures. Just know that when you log on, it's kind of like getting on the internet at the hotel. There's going to be a little splash page. You're going to say, yeah, I'm good with getting on this internet, and I understand that when I become a Venture Center member, I'm going to get something that's even better. So I have a quick question. How many of you have been here before? Oh, all right. Well, for those of you that are new, I want to ask you a question. What do you think is the one thing that startups need in order to be successful? Silence. Well, capital is good, but yes, connections. Connections are the answer, and that's the whole reason that we started the Lift the Rock program. The whole idea is that Lift the Rock helps connect the entrepreneurial community with the existing business community. So to that end, Citadel Systems, today's presenter, needs to meet owners or decision makers at information-heavy small businesses. So I want you to start thinking about who it is that you know that is an owner or a decision maker at a small business that has a lot of information that they process, data that goes back and forth. Christopher will probably tell you about that in a more eloquent way than I. And as an aside, if anyone can connect him to Charles Morgan, that's kind of his dream person to meet in Little Rock, so we'll see if we can help you out with that. Today, while we're at Lift the Rock, I encourage you to use the hashtag Lift the Rock on social. You can find us at Venture Center and Citadel at Citadel AR or Citadel Arkansas, except it's whatever. Type that into Twitter, and that's how you can share a little bit of love. So, with no further ado, we're going to welcome Chris, except that's not true. We are going to have a do, because nobody wants to give a presentation to a room that's sad with down energy, right? Is this thing on? Make it green? There you go. So you guys are going to give a little love, right? You're going to welcome him up here, because that's better. So how do we do that? Yeah. There you go, sir.
Thank you, everyone. As Jessica said, my name is Christopher Wright. I am the owner of Citadel Systems. We provide real-world security to small and mid-sized businesses. I keep turning around looking at that one, but I forget it's right back there. So just a little bit about myself. It seems like everyone comes up and gives a short resume. So I'm from right here in Central Arkansas, from North Little Rock. I went to the University of Arkansas, got a wonderful degree. Thank you. Got a wonderful degree in computer engineering. And also commissioned in the Air Force. And the Air Force is really where I got my start in security. About half the time I was on active duty, I was working in the information warfare, information operations area, super secret squirrel kind of stuff. But that got old for me, and I decided to move on. I worked for a company called the MITRE Corporation, where I really got hot and heavy into the security world. I was doing security testing and security consultation for across the entire federal government, really. And at the same time, I was also working for Air Force Reserves doing security testing and advising for Air Force Space Command. So I got to hang out in cool places like Cape Canaveral and not so cool places like the very north part of North Dakota. So decided to make a move again from there to move back home because I'd spent well over a decade traveling around the world. Decided it was time to come home. Took a job with FIS where I led their global vulnerability management program for about 3 years, tracking, detecting, and advising on risks and vulnerabilities to the security space at FIS. So responsible for that around the entire world, had people or systems on 5 of 7 continents. So very large, but I wanted to turn my focus back to the small business, because that's something I started to notice at MITRE, and I started to notice it was kind of helpless, and there wasn't really anybody out there to try to take care of the security needs of the little guys. So I saw an opportunity for that and decided to jump on it after a while at FIS. So a little bit about my security training and education. I have a couple of certifications in that area, CISSP, Certified Information Systems Security Professional, which is very broad, kind of the whole spectrum of security, and also Certified Ethical Hacker, which is one that's very focused on testing and advising on improving security. All right, so now a little bit about the threat. I'm going to go through a lot of things that look like scary terms, at least to me. And so talk about those a little bit to give you an idea of what we're up against. So ransomware. How many people have heard of that? Okay, a decent amount of people. This is where you have sensitive data, gets held ransom through encryption or something. Malware comes on your computer, encrypts your data. The only way you can get it unencrypted is if you pay a ransom to somebody to get the decryption key. Very big right now, probably the number one threat in the security realm. Other areas, social engineering, con men trying to trick you into doing something that you don't want to. Hacking, this is one where I think we all have a different view of this. A lot of people outside security imagine the guy in the ski mask in the dark room trying to hack your computer. We kind of have a joke in the security realms of what kind of ski mask you like to wear while you're hacking. But it's really not like that. It's mostly automated. But that's another threat in the area. Phishing. Well, we all know that. If you work in a corporate world, you've probably had experience in training or something like that. Disasters is one where we don't often align that with cybersecurity, but if you can't access your information or your communications channels when you need them, how do you do your business? Can your business survive without that, without those avenues? Theft and loss, again, we think of this a lot more in I've got to go buy a new laptop or I've got to go buy a new smartphone. But do you ever think about the information that's on there, the criticality and the sensitivity of that, and how much it would cost to recover that information or protect that information if you lose that device? Identity theft, I think we all know about that. Botnets is one that's been around for a long time where you lose control of your computer to someone else trying to do nefarious things. People will use this to perpetuate things like phishing and hacking and ransomware and botnets. Espionage, this is one that's very new to small business circles, but we often think of it like a Tom Clancy novel. It's really not. Anytime you have a disgruntled employee, disgruntled former employee, a competitor wanting to get an edge on you, there's opportunities for espionage. Just recently, how many people heard about the Cardinals and Astros hacking? That's corporate espionage on a small business scale. You know, they may make those teams may make a lot of money, but they're still a small business in size. The guy from that perpetuated it from I think it was a former Cardinals employee to the Astros, got caught, recently convicted and sentenced to 4 years in prison. So it's a very big deal. And finally, malware. We don't talk about viruses or Trojan horses or worms anymore because it's all in one. It's not just one of those things. We're talking about malware in general. And any of these can be used to perpetuate any of the other ones. So this is the terms that we look at from the security side. What does this mean to the business? $217 per record. So this is from a 2015 IBM study that says for each individual sensitive record that you lose, so credit card information, personal information, a healthcare record or something like that, it costs you $217 to recover. You're not just going to lose one record. So do you have 1,000 clients? Do you have 10,000 clients? 100,000 clients? Could you afford $217,000 if you got attacked, you got breached, and your records were stolen? So this is big business, small business across the board. $38,000 per breach. This is a 2015 number for average cost of a breach or a compromise on a small business. Fortunately and unfortunately, there's a 2016 survey that just came out, and that number is over doubled. $86,500 is the cost of a breach to a small business. That's a lot of money. I don't know, Corey, can you afford that? I can't afford that. And this is an annual study put out by Kaspersky Lab. It's a survey of businesses where they go and they ask them how much did it cost, and then break it down into different areas of expense, divide it by large and small business. So this is very focused on the small business, very germane to the conversation. And then $17,000 per ransom. Unfortunately, average for ransomware attacks is all across the board. This is just a prominent one that happened in California earlier this year. A hospital had their information taken ransom, and they decided to pay the ransom, and were lucky enough for everything to work out where they got their information back. But they had to pay $17,000 to get it. And more so, the intangible side of things is what really hurts the small business. Reputation and time are two big hits against the small business owner. Reputation can generally be recovered. We've seen that businesses that get attacked, if they put forth the effort and show that they're doing well to recover from a breach, they can recover the reputation. But time is a sink, and you don't get that time back. So I say think about it this way. Would you rather spend the time continuing to grow your business and go up, or would you rather spend the time having to rebuild from a loss? So the big guys, that's kind of hard to see there, but that's an army of people. The big guys can afford to hire an army of folks. Unfortunately, the small guys can't. But there's all sorts of tasks that need to be done. You've got a chief information security officer. This is your decision maker and the program driver. Architects to design your network, design your information flow, where everything goes. Testers and assessors to make sure that your protections are in place and they're working correctly. Security awareness folks. These are the ones that go out and train your employees to detect phishing attacks and help them become the first line of defense against that. Policy and process. These are the people who actually decide how you're going to employ security in your business to make it cost effective and responsive to the risk that you have in your business. Then you have compliance analysts. If you have any compliance requirements like HIPAA or payment card or PCI or anything like that, then you're always going to have someone to make sure that you're in compliance with that. So these are just 6 distinct roles in a larger group. And of course the small guy can't afford to hire one of each of those. They can't even really afford to hire one guy that could do all that. They only need that in a certain portion. So that's really where we come in. However, we still have some more problems to overcome. So the first one is probably the biggest one, where a lot of people think it won't happen to me. How many people heard of the Arkansas Library Association hack earlier this year? Thank you. This is one that's actually kind of scary. The Arkansas Library Association is a nonprofit group supporting libraries across the state. This is not a high dollar organization or anything. The proverbial sweet little country librarian is basically the majority of their membership. Well, their website was very old and it got hacked, and all of the membership roles were stolen with personal information, home addresses, phone numbers, and things like that. This was done by ISIS, the terror group, and they took that information and they posted it to one of their kill lists, and just to affect terror and fear in everybody. And this just was an absolute shock to these folks, because who wants to attack little small town librarians like that? But that's kind of the wake-up call that says, yes, it can happen to you. If it can happen to these people, you're not stealing money, you're not stealing anything like that. It was just used to affect terror. Think about how much more of a target you are if you actually have money, if you have sensitive records or something like that. So the threats are turning their focus to the small guys. The big guys are getting better at it. They're picking all their low-hanging fruit, so there's not as much to come out with the big guys. So the attackers turn their focus to the small guys, because if they can hit more of them, they can get a reasonable return on investment. And I'm sorry, but your IT guy isn't your security guy. Also, your computer smart nephew isn't your security guy either. It's 2 different skill sets. There's some overlap in there, and your IT guy supports it, but they're not going to take care of your security, unfortunately. Their focus is different. They want to keep your systems running, keep everything up. They are not considering risks and security implications of decisions. There's very little industry focus on small and mid-sized businesses as well. Most of the labor pool for security has been snatched up by the large guys because realistically there's a negative unemployment rate in the security career field right now. There's also a big fallacy of total automation and the silver bullet. You probably see a security vendor, it's like any vendor is, but security vendors are more used car salesmen. They want to come in, and I apologize to any used car salesmen out there. I don't want to offend you or anything. But they'll come out and they'll sell you a piece of software. They'll try to sell you a piece of software that they say will do everything and solve all your problems. Well, that's really not going to do it. It's a whole system of things to take care of your security, and most of which are going to be no cost. It's just a quick change or a small change in how you have a system configured or how you run a process or how something is built in your organization. And then a lot of these folks already expect you to know what you need. How does a doctor or a lawyer know what they need with security any more than you going into a lawyer's office or a doctor's office and you tell them exactly what you need and how to do it and the end all? If you could go into a doctor's office and tell them what was wrong with you and what to prescribe you, why would you need a doctor? So here's what we offer to solve all your problems. Actually, here's what we probably offer to help you through this. Our flagship service is a continuous service for a flat monthly fee. And this is meant to always keep you up to date. So since security is changing, the risk landscape is changing, your business is always changing, you need to focus on this ongoing. And it's just a regular recurring thing. So we do this trying to keep it as cost effective and resource effective as possible. And when we're talking about the flat monthly fee, this is hundreds of dollars, not thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. So it's within the budget of a small business. So through that, we do security risk assessments, continuously updated. So each month by month, the business owner or the person responsible for this understands what their risk is. And it's constantly updated. So in June, you know what your risk is. In July, in August, October, September, all that. My year's different. We also provide security awareness training for your workforce. This is really where a lot of the threats are to small businesses now in what we call the cognitive space, the phishing, the ransomware, the social engineering, and things like that. So we want to empower your employees to help protect you. And we do this by providing the realistic, right now, what does ransomware look like? What are the phishing campaigns that are active? So they can look at it and they don't have to decipher in their head, is this phishing or is this not? No, that's exactly what he said. It's an invoice attachment. It's very vague. It's, the subject line is this and whatnot. And then the vulnerability remediation projects really take what the recommendations that come out of the security risk assessment, and this is where the rubber meets the road. So we put the plans in place. If there needs to be a purchase, we make the purchases. We work with the people in your organization to implement that or make the changes and ensure they're done correctly and successfully. Some additional services that we can provide as well, security support. This is one that's a little more vague. If you have strategic needs, you want to move, or a company wants to acquire or merge or something, then there's going to be security concerns in there. See you at least nodding over there. I've done M&As as well, so I understand the security implications for that. But small businesses don't really think about what it takes to bring another business in and normalize what they do. Security being one of the big things to make sure that acquired business is at the same level of security, so you're not taking on a lot of additional risk. If you want to move buildings, if you have a startup that you want to investigate the security posture of an application or something like that, then that would be where we support there. Vulnerability scanning and penetration testing to support compliance. All compliance has this checkbox requirement that you do one of these or both of these, and we can support that. Also custom solutions, because I'm not going to pretend like I know everything that any of you guys would ask, any of you guys might need in your businesses or your enterprises to meet your security needs. And so here's really, I think, where we're different. What I do is provide a measured presence but full availability. I know as a small business owner you're working towards your goals of whatever your business is. Maybe that is connecting people on the water. Maybe that is mergers and mergers and normalization of business processes and things like that. But that's what you're focused on. And you don't want to be focused on security any more than you want to be focused on the legal aspects or insurance or facilities or anything like that. So I know I'm going to have to be there. I know I'm going to have to talk to your people, but I need to do that in a measured way. And that needs to be as limited impact on your business as possible. But on the flip side of that, if you have security questions, if you have concerns, if you want to talk about something, then I want to be available whenever you need it. I also want to be realistic when I'm assessing your risk. Unfortunately, we have chicken little syndrome in a lot of people in my career field, and everything is a critical risk. If I come in and tell you everything is a critical risk, nothing is a critical risk. We have to be able to appropriately prioritize those risks so that we can address the highest risk first and then on down to the lowest risk. So if I need to be realistic in how I tell, or what I tell you that those risks are for the different vulnerabilities. Also provide unbiased recommendations. I have no vendor connections. I don't have any bias to try to upsell a certain vendor or try to sell you a specific vendor. I want to work with you to find the solution that works best in your organization. At the same time, I want to be creative and realistic in the recommendations or the implementations that we do. If I can give you a 70% risk reduction at zero cost or a 100% risk reduction at $10,000, we need to say, is 70% enough? So I'm spending zero instead of 10,000, because it's always a balance. There's no absolute pure 100% security. One of the terms I've coined is responsible automation too. I think we try to automate everything in security, but there are things you can automate, things like scanning and reporting, but there are other things that should never be automated, like analysis and decision making. So we need to automate where we can and where it's feasible to reduce the cost, but we need to make sure that that human is looking at things and they're working within all the scope of the variables of risk and security and operations of your business where it's appropriate. And finally, I want to be your trusted advisor. I've been this throughout my entire career. I got called into many government CISO offices, talked to federal judges, working with executives that they would come to me, call me, and say, what do you think about this? This is really where the relationship has the biggest benefit, is that if you can talk to me, and you believe he's going to give me a straight answer, no BS, and he's not trying to sell me anything, a product or a service or anything, then I've won. So lastly, I want to leave you guys with a quote. If any of you see my card, you've seen this on the back of my card, I think this is very apt to what I do. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, by the great Benjamin Franklin. If you put a little effort in up front, it will save you from putting in a lot of effort after something breaks. So once again, my name is Chris Wright, Christopher Wright, whatever you want to call me. I'm with Citadel Systems. I'm the owner of Citadel Systems, and we provide real-world security to small and mid-sized businesses. So with that,
all right, so there was a lot of Twitter engagement, which makes me think that you guys have questions. So who has a question for Chris? When you have a question, you're going to trot your little tail over here to this mic so that the people watching at home can hear what your question might be. Well, you can trot your tail of any size. Yeah.
Good morning, Chris. Can you hear me? My question is, since you don't align yourself with a vendor, do you align yourself with like some accredited outsourced associations, or let's say that you're working with auditing groups and things like that? Because I almost believe that would give you a better pipeline of customers to consider, right? Is saying, hey, okay, we are aligned well, because what my lead-in is, are compliance and policy that are set in by certain small businesses, either insurance or whatever, do they require an on-site, on-staff type of security presence, or do they do, like your business, do they align well with businesses like yourself, and does that open yourself up for opportunity? That's my question. So the question is, do you align to an association or a group, And does that better give you some opportunity for businesses to do business with you?
Yeah, that for things like HIPAA, and it kind of depends on the compliance, the compliance framework. For things like HIPAA, there's not really, and that's a government requirement, so it's a little different. But there's not really any association or anything that's formal that would go with that. However, there are, I am very well aware, I spent most of my time working for the government, working for Medicare. Like 80% of the stuff I did was working for Medicare, so I'm very well familiar with HIPAA. But there's, through HHS, Health and Human Services, they publish a lot of guidelines on that, and that's what we follow. For things like PCI, which is another common small business framework, there are certifications and things in there, and that's probably something that I will be working for, but it has a lot more requirements than what I can handle right now to actually get the formal I am a QSA or I am something like that for that. So that's something to work towards in the future, but it's not something that I have right now. Thanks for breaking the ice, Corey.
So would you describe for us what your typical client engagement looks like?
Sure. How much time do we have?
All right, a short one.
Okay. So a preferred client engagement would be the ongoing security continuous service. So really what that would look like would be month to month coming in. At the beginning, it'll be a little bit heavier than the rest of them because you have to do that initial assessment. But come through, do the technical vulnerability assessment, look at the processes that are involved in security from HR, finance, things like that. Just generally look at what's in place right now for security. And it doesn't have to be a formal program. A lot of people will have antivirus or they'll have locks on their doors, and those are part of security, and people don't even think about that. But that's what's looked at when we do an assessment or something like that. And then take the results of that, prioritize that. Say if I came into a business that just had that very bare minimum stuff, they're probably going to have a lot of risks. And then take that, work with the decision makers or the business owners to say, what is a reasonable time for us to implement this over? I don't want to come in and do this, just shut your business down for 2 weeks and go crazy implementing all this stuff. But I will pick little pieces of that and do that from highest risk to lowest risk over 6 months, over 12 months, over 24 months, or something like that. So if I started today, it would be that initial assessment, figure out where the risks are, start building a plan to address those risks over an acceptable period of time, come back next month, update that risk assessment, make sure that plan is still in line with highest to lowest risks. If I need to readjust, we'll do that, and then continue on. That process is done over, months and months going down the road. And I really want to hit on the prioritization on the risk remediation of the no-cost solution too. I don't want to force you to buy something unless there's absolutely a need for it. Because I think, and I've seen from my 10 plus years of doing this, that most of the solutions are just change the way you do this or adjust the process or something like that. So it's going to be things like that, whereas maybe in month 3 we're working on how accounts are managed or how people are onboarded in the company. And that's just going to be something like make sure they sign this piece of paper that says here's how you can use the network and here's what you should and shouldn't do or something like that.
I just wanted to ask if the small business in operation handles a lot of financial or government information. Is the law on security there more front end or back end? By which you mean, is it more legally imposed minimums of security that they must make sure you have before you operate? Or do they just hold you more so legally liable after a breach happens? And it's up to you to provide that security, and how does your organization work with it?
It's actually both. So depending on the situation for the company, there's Graham Leach Bliley and there's Sarbanes-Oxley. And both of those are meant, you said financial and government type stuff, so I'm keying in on that. But both of those laws are intended to protect the financial decision-making process, to prevent the Enrons and the Lehman Brothers and things like that that tanked the economy when they went south. But those guys were basically cooking the books, keeping improper results, and there's a lot of things that are put in there with both of those, GLBA and SOX, to try to protect that decision-making and financial data flow process. A lot of it is up front to put the protections in, and that's kind of where it gets a little difficult when you're looking at it from a security aspect, because they just say put protections in. It's not really spelt out like PCI or HIPAA is, but there's legal precedent for things like responsible protections and things like that. So those words actually mean something, and they usually mean you abide by a framework. So you would take something like the NIST critical security controls or something like that and implement that framework up front. After the fact, though, there's a reporting aspect of that, similar to like HIPAA. If you have a records breach, you have to report to the people whose records were breached and Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. But the same thing for the financial data. You have to report that back to the SEC and filings for that sort of thing. So it's both sides of that. You have to protect it, and then if you lose it, you get in trouble after the fact.
And just a small follow-up on the back end of you talked about HIPAA and reporting people to breaches. Are you does your liability? I know it must to an extent, but is your liability just absolute, or if it breaches, even if you had every amount of security they could have asked you to have, you're still liable for it, or is it always subject to being mitigated for?
Yeah, there's mitigations. You have to come through and look at what the impact was. So if you lose records and there's protections in place, say if you had a laptop in your car and it had some sort of sensitive records on it and somebody broke your window and took your laptop. If your hard drive was encrypted, then you're pretty well good. If your hard drive was unencrypted, then you need to go out and find what records were on there, who was affected, the scope of it to determine what the reporting level is, and then you would act from there. Usually that's bringing in another third party to do all the cleanup and things like that. There's very good companies for that do that, kind of the cleanup and the mitigation after the fact. But then you would look at that and determine, do I need to provide identity management services to the people who were breached, or can I prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that information was protected because that laptop was encrypted using this and this manner and this and yada, yada, yada. Round two.
This question's around, I know that you're looking at companies' security. Do you ever branch into the realm of customer privacy and how they're managing customer data and what assumptions and privacy protocols that they have in place so that they are managing that from a security perspective?
Yeah, from my standpoint, that's not any different. That's security as well. And when you're looking at things like HIPAA, you've got the privacy rule and the security rule, and they both tie in together. The only difference between the both of those is that the security rule is focused on electronic stored data, and the privacy rule is also paperwork. So, and like I said, there's processes, paperwork, and everything. To me, that's all part of the grander scheme of security. If you can have everything locked down the most as possible, but if you leave a stack of sensitive papers on a desk right by the window on the street over here that everybody walks by, I can get Corey Belkin's social security number and know that he has this, all this health problems, and, extort you for some money, or, go out and use your social to get a credit card.
Well, mine is also from a marketing perspective. Are they inadvertently using customer data in a way that which they never signed up to use the data in the first place?
Ah, gotcha. That could be an aspect. That's mostly from the HIPAA side, because there are specific ways to do that. But from a security standpoint, that specific aspect of privacy is not so much part of security as it is, part of privacy. But HIPAA does call that out. So for a healthcare provider or something like that, that would be perfectly within the realm of looking at that. But that's something to look at along the way to, that's more of a a reputation kind of thing or a fraudulent sort of thing. So, yeah.
Anybody else? Everybody's confident, all your stuff is secure, and you don't have any questions about things that could go horribly awry, or no, nothing? All right, well, thanks, Chris.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm gonna take this back. Okay, so you guys know how this works, right? This is the part where you focus on the little cards in front of you. Everybody should have a little card that looks very similar to this one here on the screen. You need to think about who you know that Christopher and Citadel needs to meet, right? Again, if you can make a connection to our buddy Charles Morgan, he would probably love you forever, so I'm just putting that one out there. But he specifically wants to meet decision makers or owners or founders of companies that are information heavy small businesses. Can you give me an example of an information heavy small business so they can think about it? Okay. Okay, so anybody with IP, anybody who keeps records and files, it sounds like doctors, lawyers, dentists, accountants, manufacturers, I don't know. I just feel like you probably know a doctor, you probably know a lawyer, you probably know an accountant, you probably know somebody who, has that whole Google Drive situation full of files and data that they need to make sure is secure, right? So Google probably does not appreciate me calling out Google Drive, which I'm sure is super secure. We love Google. Anyways, so if you guys could fill out those cards for us, we would highly appreciate it. Ashley's going to collect them from you. You can give them to me. You can drop them off at the front. Remember, we are never asking for anybody's contact information. We're just going to email you and say, hey, Corey, you said that you were going to introduce Christopher to Susan. Don't forget to introduce Christopher to Susan. That's it. That's all we're doing. So next week, we'll be back here Tuesday at 9 a.m. And next week is Atlas Coffee Club. You guys are really going to enjoy that because I know most of you are caffeine junkies. So join us back here next week for Atlas Coffee Club. And as always, if you have an entrepreneur that you know that we need to know, put that on the bottom of the card for me. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next Tuesday.